Facilitation is a critical social skill for achieving collaboration, and it's the art of leading a group of contributors over whom you have no authority to deliver a predefined outcome. There are a lot of different facilitation styles, and each one can succeed in the right environment, and it can totally fail in a hostile environment. To be sure, facilitation is not just for the nominal leader of the conversation. Any contributor can facilitate the outcome. The word facilitate means literally to make easy or easier. Anything you can do to aid participants in the creation of the desired outcome is invaluable. I'll talk about a couple of techniques that might come in handy when you're leading or participating in a workshop or conversation of any kind. First off, use an open issues list. This simple gimmick has saved my bacon a lot of times. The idea is simple, but it does require a little bit of finesse to work. A lot of call this, by the way, a parking lot. I've always called it an open issues list to emphasize that it only contains topic the group couldn't resolve during the session. That name helps to maintain the group's focus on the objectives of the get-together. Throughout the meeting, I like to keep that open issues list visible for everyone to see. I encourage the participants to avoid these topics, and I encourage them to call out others that start to bring them up. This actually discourages people from constantly trying to steer the discussion toward their pet peeves. At the very end of the session, I'm going to review that open issues list to A, make sure that the issue is still relevant and still open. And if it is, then B, assign the issue to an attendee to own for a resolution. Now, the default owner is generally the product manager or product owner, or whoever has approved the meeting. And then ask them to report back to the group by a specified date. Armageddon Storming. I love this technique for situations in which the group's trying to solve a particularly difficult problem and is challenged to find solutions. If the organization has tried a lot of different solutions to address the problem, but it keeps rearing its ugly head, try this. First step, give the group a limited amount of time, typically 3 to 5 minutes, to imagine how to make the current situation worse than it already is. I'm asking them to exaggerate the impact that the problem has. Turn the problem into a catastrophe. Second, discuss each scenario and try to determine, is it realistic enough to spend time on? What could we do to prevent, recover, or if it happens, pivot if you can't recover? And you can then generate a ton of user stories, features, or requirements that eliminate or at least alleviate parts of the problem. Affinity mapping. That's something that starts with a decent-sized collection of diverse ideas, whether they're user stories, requirements, features, problems, solutions, test scenarios, or whatever. The simplest implementation is to have each item on a Post-it note or an index card. Now, you also need some space somewhere to either stick or pin this stuff up. Simply pick one of the items out of there and place it somewhere within the boundaries of your display area. If you feel that the selected item is central to the topic you're discussing, place it towards the middle of the space. If it's more of a peripheral topic, place it more towards the edges of the space. Next, pick up the next item from the collection and place it as close to the pinned item as you feel is indicative of the relationship. If it's very similar to the pinned item, overlap them. If it's not related at all, place it farther away to initiate a new group. That placement is a visual representation of the affinity between the two items. Now repeat this until you have placed all of your items somewhere in the display space. Work with the group to assign a name to each group of items, and then discuss the relationship between the different groups. This visualization of the grouped items can generate a lot of insights that the individual items hide. If it's appropriate to meet your objective, you can use voting or any other prioritization technique to ensure the most pressing groups are identified. Ideastorming. Brainstorming is a phenomenal technique for generating an abundance of ideas related to any topic whatsoever. Effective brainstorming is time-boxed, meaning more than a few minutes is really draining, and it's also focused on clearly defined objectives. It's very invigorating for those who aren't shy. Every contribution generates additional contributions, and when a group is in the zone, they can generate a number of ideas that's mind-boggling. Given that, brainstorming is not for everyone. First off, a lot of people fear public speaking, which I define as opening your mouth when other people, especially strangers, can hear you. Now, these type of people will only mention an idea when they feel safe and that limits their contributions. Secondly, in a fast-paced brainstorming session, a lot of people are overwhelmed by the vast number of ideas being tossed out, and that makes it difficult for them to form original thought. Silence brainstorming, also known as brainwriting or silent ideation, comes to the rescue. Contributors jot their ideas down either on post-it notes, index cards, or slips of paper. They place that idea on a pile in the middle of the group, and now try to think of another idea. If they come up blank after giving it a serious try, they can pick someone else's idea from the pile and see if it triggers any additional ideas. Now, regardless of whether the ideas came from silent or noisy brainstorming, the ideas need to be evaluated. So once the group starts to get bogged down, meaning there are very few new contributions, you stop the exercise and use affinity mapping to organize the results into groups and subgroups. Now, those are 4 techniques that I've used a lot of times to lead collaborative conversations. If you want more options, you can Google facilitating workshops or something similar for a ton of techniques from other facilitators and other authors. You can never have too many techniques in your toolkit. Einstein once stated, "The more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know."